Hello there and welcome to Unqualified Opinions, and on today's video we'll be discussing our Week 3 NFL Power Rankings. I'm your host as always, Marko, and I'm joined by a couple people that are not in favor of my Power Rankings this week, Tim Seipel and Will Byerman.
Yeah, I'm just going to be straight up with you, Marko. Usually we have a good time with our segment. We laugh, we joke,
some banter.
We argue a bit. However, we really haven't ever had to take you outside behind the barn and put a slug in you. But that's exactly what we have to do here because...
Hey, we got to do what we got to do.
Got to do what you got to do.
Well,
because these
power ranking is abysmal.
This is no bueno, Marko. This is no bueno.
Okay, let's get into it. My honorable mentions, I have the Las Vegas Raiders, LA Rams, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and Tennessee Titans. At 10, I have the Arizona Cardinals. 9, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers. 8, I have the New England Patriots. All three of those teams, 8 through 10, no movement from my list last week. Arizona, obviously a good win against Washington. Pittsburgh snuck by against a really disheveled Denver team. And New England lost in a tight one to one of the best teams in the league. Then at 7, I have the 49ers dropping 2 spots, despite absolutely destroying the Jets. The amount of injuries they sustained, now not all of them are season-ending, but the Nick Bosa one's really going to hurt. So I've dropped them 2 spots. The Bills slide up 1 spot, as do the Packers, after solid victories on Sunday. 4, I have the Saints dropping 1 spot. They just didn't look put together against the Raiders. But they were missing Michael Thomas, and they just looked out of rhythm. But I don't think that's going to be a consistent theme for the Saints. I think they're still a very solid team. I've got them at 4. 3, I have Seattle. They beat a very solid New England team, and at times looked like they could have run away with the game. And Seattle definitely looks like the best team in the NFC right now. 2, I have the Chiefs. I've dropped them 1 spot from last week after the tight game against the Chargers. I hate to do this before Kansas City even loses a game, but just based on the way the number 1 team, Baltimore, was playing, how they've dominated these first 2 weeks, I think it's pretty warranted to allow Baltimore to have that top spot. So Will and Tim, go ahead and devour the list. What do you hate?
So I'll start by saying there's 3 picks I like. And we'll just kind of start number 10 there, because I think the Cardinals should be the number 10 team. They've looked pretty impressive. Murray's looked better than I thought he was going to. He's a remarkable runner. Like, we have some really good running quarterbacks in the league. There are very few of them. I'd say, like, when they're running, they look like any other football player running. Like, your Josh Allen, your Cam Newton. They run, they still look like a quarterback running. Kyler Murray just looks like a pure runner in every sense of the word. But I think 10's a good spot for the Cardinals because they still have some proving to do before I consider them like a legitimate upper tier team in the NFL.
Yeah, and with the division that they're in, it really does come down to, are they going to be able to perform at this level throughout the whole season? How is the defense going to hold up? How are they going to do with Kenyon Drake? Because obviously they're not going to be able to rely fully on Kyler Murray as they have in the past 2 games. But I do like this position for them because I think the Arizona Cardinals are really promising and do have a shot at making the playoffs.
Yeah, last week having them at 10, I know you guys were you thought it was a bit premature, but I think they're definitely growing into this spot. And I even mentioned that they probably won't be in this spot at the end of the season. But I think Kyler Murray has a legitimate chance to carry this team quite far, potentially into the playoff race. Your guys' thought with Steelers at 9, any qualms?
I mean, I don't mind the Steelers at 9. I think they could be a little bit higher. I think that defense is really good. I think the offense is just clicking. Last year it was really, really tough to watch the Steelers with Mason Rudolph just not make any movement and not seem to have any rhythm on the offensive end. But I think this year, especially with Deontay Johnson, Claypool from Notre Dame, the wide receiver, and then you got Juju Smith-Schuster, that just seems to be back in his regular form. And Ben Roethlisberger just been phenomenal. I really like the Steelers. I think they can move up, definitely.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I just kind of had them at 9 just because they faced a Denver team that was already pretty weak and got weaker as the game went on injury-wise, and they allowed a very weak Denver team to get within 1 possession and potentially be able to win the game on the final play. I just didn't think that was enough for them to jump New England at 8. New England at times looked pretty outmatched by Seattle. But, it came down to it. They were within a yard of beating Seattle, who is number 3, and I don't think you guys have a problem with Seattle at 3. So I think this New England team, while I don't think they are what they were in the AFC, I still think they're a very legitimate team.
Tim was right about the Steelers, except that I definitely think they should be higher. They should be higher than the Patriots. They're a better team on defense for sure, probably on offense pretty soon. I just don't know if the Patriots deserve to be in this spot at all, Marco, because the Seahawks defense, contrary to the norm for Seattle, that's a bad defense. Bad secondary. There's just not a lot of talent out there right now for Seattle. It's a patchwork defense. We'll see if Pete Carroll can get something going. He probably will. But for now, there's not a lot I like there. However, on offense, they're built to beat you in a shootout, and that's what they did with the Patriots. The Patriots didn't come in and take on this traditional Seahawks powerhouse defense and hang 30 on them. The Patriots showed up, and they lost a shootout to a better quarterback and a better offense and a better team.
Right, but it still was within a single play of the narrative being completely reversed and them winning. So I think, there's a certain level of merit there for New England. I understand Seattle is clearly the better team.
I just don't think it's
for
enough
large
merit
stretches.
to keep them above the Steelers, keep them above the Cardinals, to maybe even keep them above the Titans.
Even the Rams. The Rams are 2-0 against the Cowboys and the Eagles, which aren't bad teams. They've been struggling, yes, but the Rams have been doing phenomenally on the defensive end and have been picking it up on the offensive end as well. I think the Rams should be probably around this 9-8 spot.
I don't trust the Rams yet. I think we still need some time to figure out.
But you trust the Patriots while wearing a Patriots baseball hat.
I know they don't have Brandon Cooks and Todd Gurley, and they seem to be doing okay. But I want a few more weeks to judge the Rams on who they are. Do you guys have a problem with San Francisco at 7?
Oh, yeah. The San Francisco 49ers are 0-2. There's no reason that an 0-2
they're 1-1
be in the top 10.
They are 1-1.
They are 1-1? Oh, my bad.
They beat the Jets.
But they definitely didn't show it. They had their practice squad out there and they still beat the Jets. I think anybody's practice squad could beat the Jets because the Jets are going 0-16. That's another thing. But the 49ers, they do not look good. They obviously have been hit really hard with the injury bug that we have seen in the segment that we do. We talk about Jimmy G, and we talk about Solomon Thomas, who's also out with an ACL injury, and you got Nick Bosa, the potential defensive player of the year, or was a potential defensive player of the year. This team is going down fast and hard, and I just don't see them sustaining anything.
I think, they don't have the hardest schedule. I think this is a team that will continue to balance itself out. I don't think Nick Bosa makes or breaks this team. What do you think?
I think he and Thomas absolutely do. Sherman's out as well. And the big thing is they do have a hard schedule, Marco. They're probably in the most contested division in the NFL right now. We were talking about the Rams. I agree with you. I don't think they're quite top 10 yet, but they're 2-0 right now, and they've looked pretty good. The Seahawks are obviously phenomenal. The Cardinals look like a transcendent team. There's no margin for error in the NFC West.
Right.
And the 49ers are pretty much already there right now.
Well, I thought, at the beginning of this season, I thought the 49ers were a top 5 team, and now I've got them at 7. But just because people get injured doesn't mean I'm going to knock them down until they lose a few more games and prove that they're no longer. We know they're probably not an elite Super Bowl contending team, but they're still a very solid playoff team as they're still currently constructed. But until they prove me wrong, then I'll knock them down. Just because a guy tears his ACL doesn't mean I'm going to knock a team out of the top 10 because they beat a team by 18 last week. Try as you may, but not everyone can do that even on their best day.
It's the Jets, though, man.
It is the Jets.
You can put this in the pick'ems or something, but Adam Gase is probably going to be gone by Halloween. He should be gone now.
That's a potential. So you guys have any problems with Buffalo at 6?
This is one of the 3 picks I really like. Love Josh Allen. I know I've been singing his praises since draft time. Absolute cannon of an arm. 400 yards, 4 touchdowns. I think he was one of the only players. I think he joined Pat Mahomes, Peyton Manning, and Tom Brady as one of the only 4 players to have 700 yards passing, 7 touchdowns, no interceptions in the first 2 games. Allen's on a roll. The defense is looking good. It's the Bills, so you can't entirely trust them to be higher than 6th. However, they're looking very scary so far this year.
So, Tim, I have Buffalo at 6 and Green Bay at 5, and I thought about switching the 2. They seem very close and equal in level. What are your thoughts on the Buffalo at 6, Green Bay at 5? Any qualms with those 2 right there?
So I just want to touch on real quick Josh Allen, he's obviously doing phenomenally, and I want to shout out Stephon Diggs as well. I think him
Leading the
actually
league in
having a
receiving.
number one wide receiver on his team is really helping, and it's showing. But also, I mean, Green Bay Packers have been doing phenomenally well. One thing I do see an improvement from last year, obviously, they haven't been facing the highest competitors in the league with some injured defenses, but they haven't been laying down when facing a team that may be weaker than them. I saw that a lot last year where they would face teams that they should be blowing out, and lose to them by maybe one score or two. But now the Packers are scoring upwards of 40. They have the highest total yards on offense and the most points per game as an average. And so I think the Packers are a little bit better on offense. I think the Bills have it on the defensive end a little bit more.
Yeah,
but
I think they're pretty interchangeable.
It is pretty. It's a tight line. It is definitely a tight line.
But you probably put, and that's the reason I do have Green Bay over Buffalo, is I just trust Aaron Rodgers more than I trust Josh Allen, which I think is a pretty fair bet. 4, I have the Saints. I only dropped them one spot in the loss to the Raiders. Considering I have the Raiders as an honorable mention and a team that could contend in the playoffs, I don't think it's that egregious of a loss. It was a one-possession game. It was still close, and they were without the number one wide receiver in the league. I think it's understandable that their offense wasn't firing on all cylinders. Your thoughts on the Saints at 4?
I think this should be one lower than the Packers. The Packers, yeah, they played the Vikings and also my boys, but both of those teams have looked extremely disjointed. And the Saints, just Drew Brees was not clicking. The offense wasn't clicking. And I'll give the Vegas Raiders credit. First, it's still weird saying Vegas Raiders. That's been weird for a while now.
Not as weird as saying the Washington football team, but
I don't really consider Washington a historic football team anyway, so that is kind of weird for me. But I think the biggest thing with that loss to the Raiders was it's their first game in their new stadium. There's going to be a lot of extra motivation for the Raiders to come out there and look good. And to be fair, Derek Carr's looked better. Josh Jacobs looked really good. But my gripe with that loss is just Drew Brees did not look sharp.
Well, he's old.
He is
People
old.
forget he's 41 years old, and he's not following the health regimen that Tom Brady was following at 41 either.
Drew Brees is old, but I think the bigger thing with the Saints is just you should have been able to put the Raiders team away. I don't think they needed to panic, but I just think they should be one spot lower there.
See, my thing was I was going to try and put them one spot lower, but I couldn't really picture myself putting them between Green Bay and Buffalo, because I just feel like Green Bay and Buffalo are so close that I didn't want to drop the Saints 3 spots. That's why I kept them at 4. Again, they don't feel like the 4th best team in the league, but they don't feel like the 6th best team. So I had to leave them at 4.
I'm in a weird spot where I feel like the Packers deserve a higher ranking, but I still think the Saints are better. But rankings wise, the Packers have earned it with their 2-0 record.
That's why I kept them at 4. Tim, do you have any problems with Seattle at 3?
I don't really have an issue there. I think once we get into the top 3, it becomes a little bit more of a solid. You've got your top team.
There's a gap between the top 3 and the rest of the league.
Right. Well, much. I mean, I wouldn't say as much of a gap because we do see a lot of vulnerabilities with the Seattle Seahawks. That defense is not looking good as we already talked about. So, I think the Seahawks are solid at 3, and I think that's a good spot to have them there. But, I could definitely see the Seahawks losing a couple games against some of the top 5 or top 6 teams. For sure.
I mean, certainly they were a play away from losing to New England. So, they're not perfect. And then as far as 2, I have the Chiefs. I didn't think I was going to knock down the Chiefs until they lost to potentially the Ravens in week 3 or later down the line. But just the performance against the Chargers, given the fact that Tyrod Taylor was out and Justin Herbert, his first career start, he made it that close. And considering the way Baltimore has performed the past 2 weeks, I just felt just slightly give Baltimore the edge at 1. Do you guys have a problem with that?
A very minor problem. I wouldn't have dropped the Chiefs just because, like you said last week, they haven't lost. They deserve the benefit of that as the champs. I would like to point out, too, that Justin Herbert is such a different player than Tyrod Taylor. I mean, we didn't find out that Justin Herbert was starting until before the game. He didn't find out until before the game, but the Chiefs also had no clue. The Chargers have a little bit of a hot hand going into that matchup on offense, at least, because if Herbert can execute well like he did, the Chiefs did not have time to game plan for him.
Yeah, and certainly that is a factor. But this conversation, I mean, it will continue for the rest of the season. but there will be a defining point in this conversation come Monday night when the Ravens and the Chiefs play each other. I think that'll probably define the 1 and 2 spot
Now here's my
for most likely the rest of the season.
Here's my hot take there, Marco. I'm almost at a point where, like, unless Seattle or someone else puts on an absolute show, I still feel like whoever loses the Ravens-Chiefs game probably stays at number 2 anyway. Honestly,
I would tend to agree with you. That's probably a bit of a spoiler, a sneak peek, if you will. It's to say that if these two teams match up in the AFC Championship game, it might be a better matchup than the Super Bowl. I think they're far and away the two best teams, at least right now, as the regular season play has shown us. And again, but we're 2 weeks into the season. Some teams have had easier schedules. Some teams have been more injury riddled or opt out riddled. Some teams have just not had the time to prepare. I think as the season wanes on, we will get a far better understanding of where these teams are and how they can perform. But certainly a lot going on here in these first 2 weeks. Well, that's it for my top 10 power rankings for the NFL for week 3. Tim and Will very precisely dissected it. It's got a lot of flaws, but I think there's just a lot of small decisions you have to make as far as putting a few teams in front of the other. But I don't think a lot of grotesque mistakes. So that's my top 10. And there will be another top 10 out next week that they will probably again contest. Well, that's all. Again, I'm Marko Yerkovich. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your own unqualified opinions in the comment section down below. Thanks so much for watching.